And joining us now is NFL insider Aaron Wilson with the Houston Chronicle. Great job yesterday, buddy.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, this has been a busy weekend. Bill O'Brien, the Trader Jack now of the NFL. What are your thoughts on the performance of Bill O'Brien, the GM?
Bill O'Brien's a very aggressive general manager, but he also gives up a lot in return. If you go on the trade value chart, they lose because you aren't really getting the appropriate value for the players. You know, with Laremy Tunsil, the tackle, never been to a Pro Bowl, you give up 2 first-round picks. He has a lot of leverage now in a future contract negotiation. Kenny Stills, he was going to be cut, or they were willing to trade him for a 5th rounder. Essentially, he's a second-round trade. And then pennies on the dollar for Jadeveon Clowney, former top overall pick. Never wanted to do a long-term extension for him, and obviously had a big difference of opinion in value. He wants Khalil Mack, Aaron Donald money. They weren't willing to even go to DeMarcus Lawrence or Frank Clark type of contracts. So for JD, sent to the Seahawks for a 3rd-round pick and 2 average guys, Barkevius Mingo, Jacob Martin. So yeah, not exactly what you'd expect or hope for to get from him. If you had done the trade before the July 15th deadline, you would have got more value, or let him play for you and have him and J.J. Watt and Whitney Merciless all working in tandem. But they care a lot about culture. They care a lot about a lot of things that maybe be a little ancillary to what happens on the field. Was he the greatest practice player in the history of the Texans? No, he was not. But he was a gamer, and he was a good guy. He wasn't any trouble off the field or anything like that. But it doesn't matter because Bill O'Brien has all the power, and if he doesn't feel like a guy is all in and really in his style, his way of doing things, then eventually he's going to be shipped out, and this was his chance to do it. But they would have gotten the 3rd-rounder in a comp pick if you just let him play for you. Then you get the 3rd-rounder in the offseason. Instead, you get a 3rd-rounder that's higher, about 20 picks higher than the comp pick.
That's what I couldn't figure out. JD was not a cancer in the locker room. I think he was Bob McNair's guy, not a Bill O'Brien guy, but why not just – he was ready to come in. Everything,
right.
Talking to his people just a few weeks ago, he was ready to come in and play it out.
Right, and he was in outstanding shape. And I think when he defied the Texans by refusing to go to the Miami Dolphins because they were working out a trade with them, he was going to be involved in that. They would have had to give it up less because he would have been a big part of that Dolphins trade that wound up working out for Laremy Tunsil and Kenny Stills with other draft picks and not Jadeveon Clowney. They just sent Julian Davenport and Johnson Batamosi over in the package. But yeah, when he bucked, I think it made it worse, and that's when they were just determined, okay, well, you want to play for the Seahawks. That said, who won this thing? Jadeveon Clowney. He wanted to play for the Seahawks or the Eagles. He did fire his agent briefly. He's now back with Bus Cook. He got what he wanted. He's on a contender, and he's there with Dwayne Brown. And the Seahawks, maybe they'll do a long-term deal for him. If not, he will become a very rich man in free agency next year or play under a $20 million franchise tag if the Seahawks decide to tag him and can't do a deal. He could be traded again even. But for Jadeveon Clowney, you don't have the long-term security, but at least you're with a coach that wants you, and Pete Carroll, and it's a lot more player-friendly environment. It's a little looser out there in Seattle, and they're a contender. So he's out there with Russell Wilson, he's out there with Dwayne Brown, and he's happy. He's thrilled about it. As he said on social media, it's go time.
It's go time with the smoke snorting emojis. All right, let's talk a little bit more about the Miami deal. Laremy Tunsil, yes, he's a good offensive tackle, no doubt an upgrade. Kenny Stills, he could help this team, but he was on the way out anyway. What do you think of the Tunsil deal? I thought OB rallied late in the day to get something positive. Most fans were most upset about Clowney's getting away. What's the reaction about that you have for the Miami part of this whole thing?
I think they gave up too much because Laremy Tunsil is not a Pro Bowl tackle. He's someone with the potential to become one. Jadeveon Clowney is a 3-time Pro Bowl pass rusher. Kenny Stills, I'm wondering how he's going to fit in terms of culture, all of those things.
Right.
I think they have enough at wide receiver. Obviously, they worry about Will Fuller's health and Kiki Kuti's health, and understandably so. And I think Stills will add something to the equation in tandem with DeAndre Hopkins. But I feel like they gave up too much because you don't know who those first-round draft picks will be, that second-round pick. And if this all goes south, it'll be someone else's mess to clean up. If Bill O'Brien and this regime, if they get run, if they don't succeed after pushing all the chips into the middle of the table, then it's going to be someone else, and they're not going to have any draft picks, any high draft picks. They're going to have to maybe possibly trade players on this current roster if you want to get back into the first round. And that would be interesting to see who's available. And you have a lot of contracts to negotiate now next year.
Oh, yeah.
Deshaun Watson and Laremy Tunsil potentially. Not to mention, you're heading into the season now. No deal for Nick Martin, no deal for Whitney Merciless, no deal for DJ Reader, no deal for Kaimi Fairbairn, all scheduled to be free agents. The only re-signing you have in terms of an extension is for Brennan Scarlett, who's now the starting outside linebacker. And I think that, business-wise, they're still learning on the job. Chris Olsen's an experienced negotiator. Bill O'Brien is not an experienced general manager. It takes decades to get to this point in terms of personnel. He's got the skills, he's got the motivation, obviously, but he doesn't have the experience. And until you've done it for a long time, occasionally when you're aggressive like this, you try to do the impossible, you're going to pay a heavy price, and that's what they've done. Doesn't mean that none of this will work or that they won't be good this year, but we're talking about the big picture, the long-term future, Matt, and that some of that has been sacrificed because you never will get those picks back. If you trade, maybe you get some of them back. It's draft capital. It's extremely valuable for building your roster.
I was talking with Wade Phillips about this when the Rams were in, and we were talking about, these guys, he knows Clowney, obviously, what he can do, and he said, teams just aren't going to pay, certain guys, certain things. He understands that, but we were talking about, look, they see other sports. They see NBA players with more free movement. They see MLB players with more free movement. I can't blame the guys for wanting a better deal, but at some point you have to, it's not fantasy football, but at some point it's got to go in order there of depth, of quality, put the quality together, and I don't see that the quality came back.
Right. In these deals. And the thing about Jadeveon Clowney, when you're assigning value to him, he's really hard to classify. Unique run stopper. Polished pass rusher? No. Talented rusher, yes, but never has had 10 sacks. So if you want to pay him if he wants Khalil Mack and Donald money as he does, honestly, he's not the same player as those guys. And you can make an argument that Frank Clark and DeMarcus Lawrence are better pass rushers. I've talked to a lot of executives about comps and those sorts of things. I think Flowers with the Lions is what he's really played more to that level of production. But he makes splash plays like no one other than probably like J.J. Watt.
Yeah.
But at some point, too, you're going to have to pay J.J. again. He's going to want to raise because he's underpaid right now compared to some of those guys I just listed. It's very complicated, but the thing to do was, in my opinion, play it out. Let him play for you and punt and make this decision next year. And if you had to rent him for 2 years, do that. You would still have him under team control for $36 million. If I was to tell you that you could pay him an $18 million APY for 2 years, that'd be pretty good, especially with the cap as high and as much cap as they have. It's not about the money, though. It's about whether they wanted him here. And everything they did, actions speak loudest, Matt, says they did not want Jadeveon Clowney to be a Houston Texan, and now he no longer is.
Is this defense better than it was 2 days ago? No, it's not.
They've been diminished. They don't have an explosive pass rusher in Brennan Scarlett. They have a instinctive all-around guy that's very much a hustler and a good run stopper, but he's never had a lot of sacks. Whitney Merciless only had 4 sacks last year. Yeah, I know they dropped him in coverage. I know he had some injuries. Is he capable of a career renaissance and having, the 12-sack year he did a few years back? We're going to find out. He's going to have that opportunity because he's going to be sent after the quarterback quite a bit. One thing with Whitney, I think Whitney this year, very healthy. I expect a lot from him, but I think to manufacture a rush, someone besides J.J. Watt that plays in a three-point stance is going to have to defeat a block. Whether you're DJ Reader, Angelo Blackson, Brandon Dunn, or Charles Omenihu, someone else has got to emerge as a rush threat. Otherwise, you're going to have to bring fire blitzes up the middle with your inside backers, Bernardrick McKinney and Zach Cunningham, or bring safeties. I think to get after the quarterback, they're going to have to make some changes, and they got to hope that they can cover longer. I think Bradley Roby, that helps to have a fast corner, but you've lost the physical aspect with Kareem Jackson. You've lost some range at safety with Tyrann Mathieu. Tayshaun Gibson, Justin Reed, Roby, and I think at some point Lonnie Johnson has to get in the mix.
Yeah.
If you can cover longer, then you can get to the quarterback. But they're going to have to do a really good job in coverage because you don't have the disruptive presence of Jadeveon Clowney anymore.